Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to Pao Bites with the Daily Pao. So this is Pao Bites, and it's a mini podcast episode that we run in the weeks that we don't run the Paodcast, which is our fortnightly podcast. So this time, that's a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, and there's a lot of P's because we have Purva and Pranati.
Exactly. So this time we are going to talk about shopping bazaars, and Purva has been to all these incredible shopping bazaars that keep popping up in Bombay and that we keep writing about. So
yeah, there are a lot of pop-ups.
I'll tell you why we're actually talking about them, because I was discussing this on the way here with May. She was in the car with me and she said, the whole shopping experience has changed. People are no longer shopping in boutiques and stores. Well, very few are. And shopping has either shifted online or it's taking place in these pop-ups. And what's happening in Bombay is that a lot of these individuals who've set up these bazaars, they've sort of created a space where they're launching indie labels, they're launching new food brands even. There's a lot of that going on. So that's one of the reasons we're actually talking about it. To name a few, there's the Style Cracker Borough, which is very popular with the fashionable crowd because it's run by an ex-beauty editor, fashion editor from Vogue.
That's happening this weekend, right?
There's one this weekend. This is probably the last of their season. They haven't actually confirmed that, but they're calling it a night bazaar. It's taking place at Phoenix Market City in Kurla. It's called the Style Cracker Borough Night Market, original, but it's going to be from 2 p.m. to midnight on Saturday and Sunday. So there's also the others that we'll be discussing. There's Black Taxi, there's the Lil Flea, which everybody knows about. That's the mammoth. It takes place between October and April every 2 months, actually. There's the Vintage Garden in Bandra. That's Kitsch Mandi, which also takes place in Bandra. There's Back Alley, Black Taxi. A lot of names to keep up with.
What's great about these guys is that they have a lot of indie designers. They showcase a lot of indie designers.
It's literally become like a launch pad.
Yeah, and I think that what you mentioned earlier was that if I am an indie designer, I can't afford a store. And this is a great way if I'm selling online, but people want to see my product. How do I showcase this without...
That's the thing. I don't know if this is like the Indian consumer or what, but unless we touch and feel something, we are still not very comfortable, say, buying clothes online.
Yeah.
I think there's a gradual shift towards online shopping, and I think people are like going crazy on Amazon and stuff, but those are still like equipments and tech stuff. But when it comes to clothes and shoes and accessories, you want to be able to wear it. You want to be able to see whether this cloth or the fit or, all of that. So these markets are facilitating that. What's also interesting, in addition to launching designers that we didn't know existed, is that it's actually sort of prompting people to explore their creative side. So a lot of people are just like, who have day jobs, they're getting into like, say, launching like stationery brands or like they'll do up shoes, painting shoes and stuff. So it's sort of, how do I say this? It's sort of breeding creativity, which I think is very interesting.
Right, and for people who are into clothes, so many great options. And
and it's not just clothes. The kind of choice you have at these bazaars, like a Lil Flea, there's a dizzying amount of choice.
Lil Flea has like 200 stalls or something. It is crazy. I've been to Lil Flea a couple of times and it's a little overwhelming.
It is overwhelming because the number of people, it's become like a family event. So it's not just a shopping experience, which is... I think it was just bound to happen because their scale is so massive. They always take place at the MMRDA in BKC. It's a 3-day event. What's great is that these shopping bazaars are also becoming sort of where they're involving all sorts of creative people. So there's musicians, there's artists, there's
a lot of
typo
food
artists
as well.
The food brands are launching at these bazaars. So there's a lot of sort of mixing and merging, which I think should be encouraged. But yeah, it can get a bit overwhelming. I personally don't think it's the best, when there's so many people crowding a stall, I don't think it's the best shopping experience for me because I don't have that patience to sift through something. But what you can do is collect cards and you can collect cards and look them up later on Facebook and
get in touch with them. But I think the whole idea of the ease of like going there and seeing the stuff is a big advantage. But with something like Lil Flea, they actually charge an entrance.
Which is, I think, I'm not pro that.
Yeah, I'm not pro
because
that. And
you're
Kitsch
going to
Mandi
a
does
market,
that too. And that
so-
makes sense if you go there in the evening, because they also have a lot of music. They have
Kitsch
a number
Mandi
of
is
bands.
charging it because the venue demands it.
Okay.
But Lil Flea does not. Is making...
But from all these, what would you say for a shopper, for a clothes shopper? Which place gets the best indie stuff?
Well, I think if you're like very sort of very fashion oriented, and if you like a lot of the local Indian brands, then you need to check out Style Cracker and Black Taxi. They both are very focused on Indian designers. If you like a bit more sort of bohemian, ethnic, and you're more sort of accessories inclined into like different kinds of shoes and stuff, then I would recommend Lil Flea and Kitsch Mandi. It's more like artsy stuff.
And both Lil Flea and Kitsch Mandi, as the name suggests, it's not just clothes. I mean, it's the kind of place that you go to buy all the stuff that you don't need.
Yeah.
Like, so they've got loads of stationery, they've got loads of like posters.
Well, they call themselves, they started as an art festival, and what they feel is that everybody's creating art there. So even if you're making a soap with some natural, whatever, essences and stuff, they're calling that person an artist.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting...
Stationery, badges, all that kind of stuff. It's a great gift buying place though.
Yeah,
that one you can stock up on like
it
gifts.
is.
there.
I
What
love,
about the Vintage Garden?
So Vintage
Isn't
Garden
it in
is
a
slightly
nice
more...
bungalow?
It's in a beautiful 1920s colonial style bungalow in Bandra, just on Turner Road, right next to Royal China. And the Patkar family that owns this bungalow, so the granddaughter of the guy who built it, Aarti Patkar, she's sort of repurposed it into this sort of exhibition space. And she has a vintage Ford parked in the garage there, which is why she called the place Vintage Garden. And here... The sort of showcases here tend to be slightly more upscale, so and the way they present it is very creative, but it tends to be slightly pricier, the kind of brand she gets in. I mean, there is a range, but that's how Vintage Garden distinguishes itself. So yeah, very interesting stuff happening in the shopping space. Action is not in the stores anymore, so these are some to look out for.
So that's it for Pao Bites, and we'll be back next week with the Paodcast. If you like listening to the Paodcast, check out Geek Fruit, hosted by Uber geeks Tejas Menon and Jishnu Guha. This show talks about geek culture from an Indian perspective. Star Wars, comic books, science fiction and fantasy, TV shows and more.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.